why was it in the minds of the people who killed him, who orchestrated it? Was it necessary to assassinate John F. Kennedy? What's your take on that?
Well, because by doing this in such a spectacular way and then a cover up afterwards, you're sending a message, okay, of who's really running the country.
I am a husband, a father, a lawyer, a Christian, and a proud Canadian. I started this series because it was clear that our nation needs truth. Not just another biased narrative, but real information of substance. We need access to facts and the freedom to think for ourselves. I'm Leighton Gray, and this is Gray Matter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. Well, really, I don't know anyone who is not fascinated by the Kennedy assassination. It's really become the stuff of legends. And I don't know anyone who doesn't want to find out more about it. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to have someone on the program who is actually one of the world's foremost experts on the Kennedy assassination? He's actually written a series of books about it. And in fact, released one just recently called Chokeholds, the JFK Assassination. His name is James DiEugenio. Thank you for being on the program today, James. It's a pleasure to have you on Gray Matter.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to dive in and find out more about James and all things JFK. Before we do, we've got some framing aphorisms. The first one is a very famous one from JFK from January 29th, 1961, a speech that he gave where he said, "Today we need a nation of Minutemen, citizens who are not only prepared to take up arms, but citizens who regard the preservation of freedom as a basic purpose of their daily life, and who are willing to consciously work and sacrifice for that freedom. The cause of liberty, the cause of America cannot succeed with any lesser effort." Just as true then as it is now. Next, from Jim Garrison, who said, "It is important to know who killed Jack Kennedy and why." I would say it's still important, and hopefully we're going to find out more about why today. Next, from Lee Harvey Oswald, who said, "I didn't shoot anybody. No, sir, I'm just a patsy." And finally, from Winston Churchill, he said, "It is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma." So, James, I'd like to start with this, and this may seem really obvious to someone like you, but what do you attribute the enduring fascination with the JFK assassination?
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think it's because in 1960 the belief in government was at 75%. By the 90s it had gone down to 19%. And
Wow.
the biggest single year drop was 1964, the year the Warren Report was issued.
Mm.
So I think, based on that data, I think that's the main reason that the Kennedy assassination still grips the subconscious, of most people in the United States, because I think they all sense, at least those who were around at that time, was that something really happened to the country to displace the kind of. And by the way, I was around then, all right, and
Mhm.
I can tell you that that's true. Okay, there really was a sense of unity, a sense of energy, a sense of optimism about the United States, and then somehow, uh, in that short time period after Kennedy's assassination and probably the rise of the war in Vietnam, those factors began to override and kind of take control until what you
Mhm.
have today, is essentially a country that's a portrait in cynicism, you
Mhm.
know?
Your most recent book, let's talk about this now, Chokeholds, makes a really remarkable claim. It says that readers will find up-to-date evidence that would have compelled any jury to conclude that Oswald was not guilty beyond reasonable doubt, and that there is clear and convincing evidence of both a conspiracy and obstruction of justice to cover it up.
Yes.
How do you make, without spoiling the book, how do you make this out?
All right. The JFK assassination chokeholds was called that because we wanted to pick 9 or 10 areas of evidence which we felt could not be explained away in a benign manner. Okay.
Mhm.
There was
Mhm.
no innocent explanation about. And that's what we did, me and my fellow authors. All right. Now, to give you one example, this is one I wrote about. All right. The pictures and the illustrations in the National Archives allegedly depicting JFK's brain, okay, cannot be JFK's brain. Okay. And this is one of the strongest indications of a high level conspiracy. All right. Now let me just these are three or four points that I sketched in my
Mhm.
article, which goes into much more depth, of course. All
Right.
right. The average weight of a brain is 1,340 grams. They did a study, I think, in Denmark about this, 8,000 samples. JFK's brain, after he was killed, weighed 1,500 grams. In other words, it was 160 grams over the average. Well, here's my question. How can that be? And why do I ask the question? Because in the Zapruder film,
Yeah.
we see Kennedy's head exploding at Z
Mhm.
frame 313. And you see
Mhm.
this jet of blood and tissue go up in
Mhm.
the air. Anybody who's seen pictures of the limousine afterwards, you see the blood and tissue in the back of the limousine. You
Mhm.
see Jackie Kennedy going out the back of the car. And then she was asked later, "What were you doing?" "Part of my husband's brain exploded out the back and I was retrieving it." So, how on
Oh,
earth
wow.
can Kennedy's brain weigh more than the average when it's splattered all over Dealey Plaza? It's very suspicious. Again, I don't think you can explain all those things in any kind of benign way.
Mhm. But it all starts to add up to reasonable doubt, doesn't it? One
I would
question.
say so, yeah.
Yeah. Now, here's a question for you though that I've always wondered about. I've seen the Oliver Stone film, and I've read a lot of things about the Kennedy assassination. When Oswald says that he was just a patsy, is based on your research and your writing, is that true, or was he actually involved on some level or in some way in the plot to kill Kennedy?
No, I believe Kennedy. Excuse me. I believe Oswald was what he said he was. He was a patsy. He was a guy that they were going to
Mm,
frame uh, for the crime. And I believe some of the strongest evidence of that are, number one, he was not on the sixth floor at the time, where he would have had to be if you believe the
right.
official story. And
Hmm.
secondly, Matt Crumpton wrote a very good essay in the book, The JFK Assassination Chokeholds, showing that there were upwards of 17 impersonations of Oswald prior to the Kennedy assassination. Now,
Really?
here's a guy that almost nobody knew about, okay, prior to the Kennedy
Right.
assassination. And you're going to go ahead and impersonate him more than 17 times prior to the killing? I mean, I mean, come on. Again, that is something that cannot be, innocently explained. So
Wow.
why go through this charade for a nobody who nobody ever heard of before, unless there was an ulterior motive being hidden in the background?
Hmm. And this is ongoing, isn't it? And there was a story that I read on Blaze Media. With the title was 61 years later, JFK assassination records remain hidden, and Biden is to blame. Why is Biden to blame for
Well,
these
I'm
hidden
glad you
records?
brought that up because that's one of the co-authors wrote that article.
Right.
Okay, Andrew.
On Andrew Eiler, is
Yeah,
that
that's
correct?
correct. Okay, he just got back from the National Archives. Okay, he was there for 2 or 3 days, going through all the so-called classified documents. All right,
Right.
all right, and the reason they're still classified. See, Donald Trump delayed the action. Everything's supposed to be
Mm,
declassified in 2017. Pompeo and the FBI came in and they read him the riot act. You can't do this because this agent in Morocco is going to be killed once, that kind of stuff. They always do that stuff. All right. And so he
Right.
delayed it for 6 months. Then he delayed it for 3 years. So then Biden became president. What Biden did was even worse than what Trump did. Because what Biden did, he more or less negated the JFK Act. See, the JFK Act has a strong bias in favor of declassification. And the longer time goes on, the stronger that bias should get. So, see, that's the attitude of these guys. They want to keep everything covered up. Okay. They don't want anything declassified. So, what Biden did is he restored that to where it was before the JFK Act. Now,
Mm.
I really hope that Trump listens, to people like Joe Rogan and people like Andrew Napolitano and people like Bobby Kennedy. Okay. And he keeps this promise he made on the Joe Rogan show, which millions of people saw, that one of the very first things he's going to do is declassify the last of these JFK documents.
Hmm. Well, why were these documents classified in the first place? I mean, the leader of the country was murdered in broad daylight on TV. Why didn't the American people have the right to know what really happened? So why were these documents classified to begin with, and why are they still classified 61 years later?
So, what has happened here, and I really think this is good ammunition for Trump, is that number one, the archivist fell down on their function, number one. And number
Hmm.
two, Biden tried to overturn the intent of the act. Okay.
Why would he do that? Why would he do that? What do you think?
That is a really, really good question that I'm really puzzled by. You know why I'm so puzzled? Here's a guy who's an Irish Democrat who has Bobby Kennedy's bust in the Oval Office and has John
Right,
Kennedy's portrait in his study. But he
right.
does something like this when he actually said, I think in one of his books, Bobby Kennedy inspired me to become both a lawyer and a politician. This is the way you repay him? By
Yeah.
keeping secrets
Wow.
about his brother's assassination. All right. And by the way, we know today, of course, that Bobby Kennedy never bought the official story, about his brother's death.
Really?
Oh,
Mm.
yes, yes. Right at the beginning, Bobby Kennedy is suspicious of three of the big suspects that would end up in this case. That is the CIA, the Cuban
Mhm.
exiles, and the mob. Okay, so he was right on it, right at the beginning. Yeah.
Right.
And so
Well, we know he was no fool.
yeah, well, he's a very smart guy. And so
Mhm.
this is why some people believe what happened to him at the Ambassador Hotel, this was one of the reasons for it, because he was going
Mm.
to reopen his brother's murder.
Wow, this just does so many layers, doesn't it? So, okay, maybe the obvious question. Um, these still classified documents, the one that RFK and others want released, and that Trump says he's going to release. What else is going to be revealed if these documents are classified? Do you know, or what do you suspect?
Okay. I do know because of my information from Andrew, okay, that a lot of
Right.
them are dealing with Mexico City. I
Mm.
suspect the other part is going to be dealing with New Orleans, okay, Oswald's
Right.
activities in New Orleans, because Andrew
Mhm.
said a lot of them deal with Oswald, okay, all right,
Mhm. Mhm.
because, and let me explain why I think that's the case. There was a guy named George Joannides
Mm.
who was a former CIA employee who the CIA wanted to bring out of retirement in order to work as a liaison with the House Select Committee on Assassinations. To get that job, you had to declare that you had nothing to do with the Oswald case or the Kennedy assassination back in the 1960s. And the CIA claimed that Joanides had nothing to do with that case. So he went to work. And from my sources inside the committee, Joanides ended up being a very strong obstructor of their work. He would slow down the release of documents. He would give them documents that were redacted when that was not supposed to be the case. It later turned out that Jefferson Morley discovered that not only was Joanides active, he was running the Cuban exiles who were associating themselves with Oswald in the summer of 1963 in New Orleans. It was an organization called the DRE. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, the CIA lied about not only did he have an association, he had a direct association with that particular case. And he had a strong motive to conceal some of the facts on the case. So those are the two things I think, actually three: Mexico City, Oswald, and New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. So we know from your book that Oswald didn't kill JFK. So the Warren Commission essentially is wrong or deliberately misinformed the public. Based upon all of your research, who is responsible for killing JFK?
I think Bobby Kennedy had it right. Okay.
Mm.
I believe that you had a kind of loose confederation between the Central Intelligence Agency, the Cuban exiles, and then when Oswald was not killed at the Texas Theater, which I believe was part of the original plan, because he created such a ruckus in the theater, screaming and
Mm-hmm.
shouting, "I'm not resisting arrest." There are simply too many witnesses there. Okay.
Right.
I believe they called in their old ally, uh, organized crime, who they had worked with together to try and kill Castro previously. There was Giancana, Trafficante, and Rosselli.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Ruby was a direct associate of Louis McWillie, who worked for Trafficante. Okay. And he actually visited McWillie in Havana. And there's a strong report that he actually visited Trafficante when Castro had Trafficante arrested after the revolution. So that is what I believe happened. Okay. CIA, the Cuban exiles, and then later the organized crime.
Big question though is why would they kill him? I mean, obviously there are other ways to deal with a president, to deal with a leader, peaceful ones. Why was it in the minds of the people who killed him, who orchestrated it? Was it necessary to assassinate John F. Kennedy? What's your take on that?
Well, because if you actually take him out like they did, you're doing two things. Number one, you're giving the presidency to a guy that they knew was much more conservative on foreign policy than JFK
Mm-hmm.
was, namely
Right.
Lyndon Johnson. And
Mm-hmm.
secondly, by doing this in such a spectacular way, okay, this whole thing about, high noon in Texas with a triangulation
Mm-hmm.
of a crossfire and then a cover up afterwards, you're sending a message, okay, of who's
Mm-hmm.
really running the country. And
Right.
a friend of mine who knew somebody in the Obama administration uh, said that after Obama was reelected, he asked him, he said, "What happened to all the hope and change?" And Obama said, "You saw what they did to JFK, didn't you?"
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean. You're
Yeah.
you're sending a
Mm-hmm.
message, and I think it was very effective. All right.
Mm-hmm. One of your co-authors, Paul Blow, wrote an interesting piece that I read about how kids in America are being educated or miseducated about the assassination. It's called "Are American History Students Being Misled When It Comes to JFK Assassination?" This is an important piece of the picture, isn't it? And
Yes.
it's part of the reason why you're doing this writing. Is you want to change the way people, you want to change the story about how students in America study and learn about the JFK assassination. Is that right?
Yes. And that article that you're referring to, um, he did a survey. Paul did a survey of all these books that are
Hmm.
used in college and high school as history texts. And they more or less all say the same thing. They all more or less say that the Warren Commission was correct, that Oswald was the sole assassin, and that's it. Okay. They almost
Hmm.
never even acknowledge any differences by later investigations, like Jim Garrison, like the Church Committee, like the House Select Committee on Assassinations. All right. And so Paul began to trace where the information in those books came from. And he actually called some of the authors. And this is what they said. They said, well, didn't Gerald Posner settle that once and for all with his book Case Closed? Okay.
Hmm.
And then the other one that they used, well, didn't Vincent Bugliosi settle that once for all with his book Reclaiming History? So this is what these guys do. They don't do any work. Okay, they just take the popular mainstream way out of this dilemma, and then they pin the badge of either Posner or Bigliosi on their back. And they say, well, see,
Hmm.
this is what I did. I used a very credible source. When in fact they're not very credible at all. Okay. So
Hmm.
this is very, very, I believe, problematic about what students are learning and how we solve this problem to let them unlearn it. Okay, very, very difficult, dilemma.
Now, I read another piece by Matt Crumpton entitled "It's Time to Rationally Reinvestigate the JFK Assassination." Um, when we say reinvestigate, do you agree that the whole thing should be reopened and be redone so that you can sort of erase this erroneous record of the Warren Commission? Or what are your thoughts on that?
The only way I would refer that to be done is if the last of the documents get declassified.
Okay,
Okay.
I see.
When that happens, okay, when the last of the documents are declassified, I think you can then put together some kind of board of inquiry, all right, that is going to be based upon this new information, which I believe, and I think the book makes the case that it re revives this case in a fresh and new way. But I
Mhm.
can only add this. It's going to be very important if this happens, the people that get on that board. Because as we've
Mhm.
seen, there's too many people in academia. There's too many people in journalism. Okay. There's too many people in high places. All right. That have an ingrained bias towards the JFK case. And they don't want to take in all this new information. And
Mhm.
it seems to me that the CIA was watching Lee Harvey Oswald for a long, long time. Okay. This idea that they had no interest in him is simply and utterly wrong.
Mhm.
Okay. From the
Yeah.
beginning, from his defection to the Soviet Union till the end, a few weeks before he was killed, they were watching him for
Mhm.
purposes unknown.
It sort of speaks to how important it is for the truth to be finally revealed, the full truth to be finally revealed. And one wonders, how cathartic will that be for America and for the American people to finally know the truth about why their president was murdered, because it's had such incredible generational impact on America. Just talking about those numbers about trust in government. Of course, COVID did nothing to help that. But I guess that's the reason why you're writing these great books. And the most recent one, folks, turning to our reading list, is called The JFK Assassination, Chokeholds. And this is a book we've been talking about that really makes the case that there is no case, really, no persuasive case for the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, killed John F. Kennedy. And then the other book that our guest was talking about that he's written actually in 2 editions now is JFK Revisited Through the Looking Glass. And the description I have is that this book contains the 2 working original screenplays for Oliver Stone's JFK Revisited, both the 2-hour version, Through the Looking Glass, and the 4-hour version, Destiny Betrayed. Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
correct. And
Yeah.
those 2 films sold in something like 15 countries. Okay, and
Wow.
a lot of the countries bought the 4-hour version.
hmm Otherwise, though, people can find you. You have a website, Kennedys and King. Is that
Right.
right?
That's correct.
And people are interested in finding more about James's work and his writing. All of his books are there, and also some really fascinating stuff. I spent a fair amount of time there, just kind of
Oh, thank you.
cruising around. It's
Mhm.
really interesting stuff. James, this topic is fascinating. Obviously, your writing is brilliant. We're so grateful to you for taking this time with us to tell us more about it. And I could just imagine we could sit here for weeks talking about this with you, and we might accomplish more than the Warren Commission did, but still, so wonderful to sit down with you. Thanks for taking the time to share your books and your writing with us, and much continued success with them. It's been really great having you on the program today.
I also have a Substack. I have a Substack site. Okay, just under my name. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for giving me all this time.
Oh, it's been our pleasure, and please continue writing. This is really fascinating stuff. I would love to have you back after after these new disclosures are made, and
Okay.
find out help us make sense of them. But
Okay.
thanks again
All
for
right.
being
We,
on the
we, we have
program.
a future engagement plan. Okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay. Have a good day.